Welcome, everyone. I'm Jessie Guglielmo, and I'll be your host for this evening. Our presentation tonight is Intake Mitigation and Managed Intake, the third installment of our series of life-saving webcasts featuring dynamic animal welfare leaders from across the country. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Please take a look at the left side of your screen where you'll see a Q&A window. That's where you'll ask questions during the presentation. Please get your questions in early because those submitted late in the presentation may not be processed in time for a response. In the green file widget at the bottom of your screen, you'll find the presentation handout which you can download and print, as well as links to other valuable resources. If you need help with your connection during the presentation, you can click the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. This presentation will be available on demand within 24 hours should you wish to view it again. Our speakers tonight are Dr. Sarah Boyd and Joe Hellebrand from Brevard County Sheriff's Office of Animal Services in Melbourne, Florida. With over 10 years' experience in shelter medicine, Dr. Boyd is the lead veterinarian at Brevard County, where within 3 years she helped create and implement many life-saving programs, such as their Community Cat Program, Find to Foster Program, Targeted Spay-Neuter, Owner Surrender Mitigation, and Managed Admissions Program. She has helped their animal care center achieve a save rate of 92% or better. Joe Hellebrand is the Director of Animal Services at Brevard County Sheriff's Office. A 40-year veteran of law enforcement, Joe has served in many capacities including Field Training Officer, Operations Commander, and Chief of Police. With over 4,000 hours of law enforcement training, he has a master's degree in criminal justice and is a graduate of the FBI National Academy. In addition to his duties with Brevard County, he is an adjunct professor for the Florida Institute of Technology and Columbia College and a chairman of the Central Florida Law Enforcement Data Consortium. His unit at Brevard County Sheriff's Office was recently honored as the Animal Control Agency of the Year for the state of Florida. Sarah and Joe, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you for asking us to do this. I'm Sarah Boyd. Like Jessie said, thank you so much, Jessie, for such an awesome introduction. Wanted to share with everyone that we want to first thank Maddie's Fund for inviting us and for supporting the important work that we do through their innovation grants and supporting others around the world. So thanks, hashtag thanks to Maddie. And then I have a couple slides in here just to introduce ourselves, but Jessie has already done that wonderfully. This is Joe Hellebrand, as she said, fervently working at his desk.
Me.
Yeah. And then this is myself, Sarah Boyd, and like Jessie said, I love being a veterinarian in a shelter. It brings something new every day, and most importantly, loves being an advocate and speaking for the animals. So the other introduction that we haven't made yet is our sheriff, Wayne Ivey, who is a 38-year law enforcement professional, but more than that for us is he is our backbone and the main support for Brevard County Sheriff's Office Animal Services. If we didn't have him, I don't think we could do nearly what we've accomplished in the past 3.5, almost 4 years. So wanted to introduce him as our main support. So the topic for tonight is managed intake and primarily intake mitigation. And our overview for this webinar is basically what we're going to do is talk about our shelter a little bit and talk about the history in Brevard County with our shelter. Another highlight that we're going to jump into are that open admission plus managed intake is possible. Managing owner surrenders with intake mitigation and community resources is possible. We're going to talk a little bit about how sheltering has changed over the years and then other methods of managing intake. most importantly intake mitigation, but there are other methods, of course. And why do we do this? So that we can work within our capacity for care. And that managed intake works. We'll have data at the end because everyone loves data. And most importantly of all is that it helps the pets. That's our primary goal in everything that we do. So wanted to introduce our shelter. Our shelter is no frills. We are at the end of a dirt road. Joe is nodding. It's not glamorous, but we get the job done. Our population in this county is really, really getting close to 600,000. We are east of Orlando on the coast, busy area. We have a housing capacity of 74 dog kennels with 10 smaller cages for small dogs, cat capacity of 61 cages with 4 communal rooms, but we're pretty no frills. I want to talk a little bit about the history, and Joe is going to jump in when he has important points he wants to cover too. But a little bit about our history is that we actually used to have 2 shelters in our county. The Sheriff's Office took over operations fiscal year October 2014, and prior to that, the county ran the shelter, and there was a lot of politics, a lot of mismanagement, a lot of disagreements, and of course everyone knows that the animals get lost in all that shuffle. So things were just not good. The sheriff was asked to take over, and he's got a big, huge, wonderful story about that. But what we did was change a lot of stuff when we came in. It took a while, and Joe can speak to that, but we did have 2 shelters, a north shelter and a south shelter, and ultimately we ended up closing the north shelter for humane reasons, and we basically got an intake down to, I think we estimate that it was probably 12,000 before the Sheriff's Office took over per year, and then we got it down to 8,000, and then we'll talk about how we got it down even more, down to 5,000 to 6,000 per year.
Yeah, Dr. Boyd covered it well when we took over, but he did mention it is the condition of the shelters. They were atrocious. They were dirty.
Hi, Joe. Are you there? We're having some trouble hearing you. Any apologies, everyone. Looks like we're experiencing a couple of technical difficulties. I'm sure Joe will be back in a second.
Within 6 months of taking over, we did a complete makeover, just like they did with the TV shows, where we got Habitat for Humanity involved and we got the community involved, and we basically moved every animal out of the shelter for about 72 hours, and then completely painted the shelter and redid it in that 72-hour period, and that got us a good fresh start, 6 months into the project. So, not only did we take over an organization that was in trouble, we also took over facilities that were in trouble, and they had 48 employees when we took over, but only 8 ended up coming to the Sheriff's Office. So then we began with a very steep learning curve, and that's where Dr. Boyd came in and helped us put us on the right path.
Yes, and then so the second makeover that we got was operationally and policy-wise, and that we'd like to call the year of Target Zero. We had Target Zero come in 2015, do an evaluation, and with their help, we got lots of wonderful programs implemented, and all to work towards becoming no-kill. And these stats are stats that we put on our website, the Brevard County Sheriff's Office Animal Services website. The numbers it's almost like a budget. We have the numbers in red are when we're not over 90%, and then the numbers in black are when we are 90% or above. And you can see that first year, 14-15, is when we were still working on things, and then really hit our stride in 2015, 2016. So let's get to the topic tonight. We have a lot of ways that methods that we use to reach no-kill. This is how we do it, this list right here, and more things, of course. I mean, numerous things. And it couldn't even be covered all in one night. But let's talk about managed intake and mainly our intake mitigation program. So right off the bat, we have to say that open admissions does not mean without guidelines, and that our primary goal is to help the community. And so these two things can coexist. Open admission can coexist with managed intake, and I feel like being a municipal shelter, I feel like we're a good example. You know, we have our tough points and our rocky roads, you know, our ups and downs, but overall, I think that if we can do it, anybody can. And overall, what we're trying to do is help the community, the pets in our community, by managing what pets need the most help. So here I'm going to pass this. I have Joe speak about ordinance.
So one of the things that we found early on was, you know, we also inherited the county ordinance for animal services, and it hadn't been updated in quite some time. So a light bulb went off one day when I watched all these animals coming into our shelter, and I asked, where are all these animals coming from? And they said, well, it's just people surrendering their animals. And I said, and why are we taking all these animals? He said, because we have to. So I asked the question, well, who says we have to? That's when I started researching the ordinance and realized that, you know, there's a difference between owned animals and responsible pet ownership, and what we do as a shelter and what we do is for the community to encourage a more humane community. So we took a very hard look at the ordinance. It took us a couple of years, but we were able to enact an ordinance that has things in it like Community Cat Initiative and rules against tethering and more better rules and guidelines against things like dog fighting and aggressive dogs and dangerous dogs. So we finally got that accomplished, and that's helped a lot as well.
And I definitely want to add, while we're talking about ordinances, is I always encourage everyone to read theirs. I feel like oftentimes in this industry, to use lack of a better term, but we make a lot of assumptions about what our ordinance says. But it was very important for us to read ours to realize that it didn't have any language about the legalities or that we were bound to take owner-surrendered pets. And so that is an important facet to creating an intake mitigation program. Of course, there are several methods of managing intake, and we're going to talk about others as well, but we really want to dive into talking about our intake mitigation program. So after knowing your foundation of what your ordinance says, your shelter is likely to have this option of managing the pets that come in via the owner, and it's a good time to talk about how this is a community. It's oftentimes a culture or part of the shelter culture that we assume that we need to take in every owned pet, or it's something that, you know, we, like Joe said, we have to. So where's the have to in it? However, we do want to help those that need the most help, but we have to also understand no one is magic. We needed an intake mitigation program at our shelter, and I'm sure your shelters do too. So, I'm going to go through some of the steps of what it actually looks like on the ground for us. Of course, there's a phone call, or the person shows up with their pet. But the phone call, the most important thing that this customer service staff do is get all the information first. Name, phone number, address, email. They'll even get, if they're coming in, you can advance the slide, if they're coming in with their pet, we'll also get a photo. But the main point is just to get all the information first, and then we talk about our appointment system. And we try absolutely our hardest to not confuse the people to think that they will, but we just tell them, we just need to get your information first, and then we'll tell you about our system. And so they don't do a bait and switch, but they are thorough about it, the customer service staff. So an important thing to share with you all too is that we have, this first initial line of making an appointment is not a specialized person. We have 2 to 3 staff persons up at the front desk daily, and they handle other things too. We don't even have a separate adoption area. They handle the adoptions too. So they're handling surgery intake, surgery discharge, everything in between, all the phone calls. And so they do tell us they get about 7 to 10 phone calls per day asking about owner surrender. And what they do is serve as a resource to these people that are calling or show up. So our appointment system is probably similar to other shelters that do an intake mitigation program. It's a limited number of days. It's not super limited like some shelters might be. We don't do owner surrenders on Saturday or Sunday, but we do them Monday through Friday, and they're all prior to when we open at 11 in the morning. So on the schedule, we schedule for 3 dogs per day and 3 cats per day. Majority of those slots are filled, you can imagine. We have created a policy of not taking pocket pets or exotics. Our focus is dogs and cats, and I'll get to the community resources that we give people when they have those types of animals too that they might need to surrender. But we made that a policy that we don't take those. And we did agree on a flow chart, and I'll describe that in a second. But the owner surrender appointment book is just like we are, no frills. And it gets erased and crossed out and whatnot, as we go, as things change. And then, like I said, we also have owner surrender guidelines that we as shelter administration and shelter supervisors collectively sat down and said, okay, so for our shelter, what are we going to take as owner surrenders? We discussed aggressive dogs, we discussed geriatric cats, we discussed everything in between. What is health status? What can we do for them medically? And everything is case by case. Whether we're doing daily rounds, those are all case by case. Whether we're managing a surgical, orthopedic correction, that's case by case, and even down to who is intaked is case by case. And so we definitely set our guidelines because, once again, we're not magic and no one else is. So when we are doing intake mitigation, we do want to be a community resource. And we're not the only community resource. We want to share all of the community resources that we know about with others when they call. So the customer service staff say people call or come to us because they need help, they're frustrated. They don't take it personally, and they don't take their frustration personally because we know that the front desk in the lobby can get emotional at times when their pets are involved. They do keep meticulous notes in the computer and they refer back to them as needed. But mainly what we do is offer them initially those resources. And let me share some of those with you. Our area here, Brevard County, I feel is rich in resources. So this, is going to vary across the country, of course, but we do have resources to offer people when they call us needing help. Do you need a spay-neuter? Will spay-neuter or a low-fee wellness clinic help you best to keep your pet? And we have a number of those in our community, and we refer the people that call or come in to these resources. We have a food bank called Space Coast Kibble Kitchen, but other areas have food banks as well that oftentimes not only feed the people, but will also collect dog food and cat food for the pets that come with the people that are having hard times. So do you need a bag of dog food? And sometimes that bag of dog or cat food comes from us. If it's something, a closed bag of food that we have from a donation, then of course they're going to get that bag of dog food if they need it, because that will keep the pet in the home, even if for a short amount of time. But we want to be there for them. And then, of course, we can't not mention that all the rescues that support us, because overall, no-kill is not just about us as a shelter. No-kill is about our community becoming more humane and staying more humane, and we can't do it without the rescues. And those rescues are vital for us. Now, I wrote in green that there's definitely potential for them to be full. So, but I do hear from the customer service staff do tell us that that is one of the main, that's the number one way, and we'll get to that later, but that's the number one way of helping us keep intake down and keeping pets out are our rescues. So we will share all the rescue information with people that call. So in our intake mitigation program, I feel like the absolute most important part of it is that follow-up call. Within 1 to 3 days, 3 at the latest, we have an actual designated customer service staff. So it's not just the regular people on the front lines, but like one person this is their job, and they sit down every day and do this for about an hour. And they call the people on the list and the appointments and then just really get the full story. So, and you know, people tell you everything. So they're just really thankful that we called them back most of the times. And then our customer service staff person can delve into what's going on with behavior. You know, is there an aggression problem? Is the cat urinating in all sorts of different places? What have you tried? Have you taken your cat to the vet? You know, have you tried training with your dog? What's the social situation at home? Are there children? Are there elderly family members? Where's your dog kept most of the day? You know, hours. They really get down to get a full history of what's going on with the pet. And oftentimes with that full history, so much can be gleaned. And then, of course, we can help those citizens in so many ways. So with that follow-up call, the main way that we feel that we are not seeing the owner surrender appointments come in is that they were able to get the pet into a rescue. And that may actually be a limited intake shelter in our area, or that might be an actual breed-specific rescue, or just a general rescue that works in our area. Second, they decided to keep the pet. Oftentimes they will say, yeah, I was emotional at the time, and you know, it was in the heat of the moment, but I'm so glad that I had a minute to think about it, a few days to think about it, and we've decided to keep our pet. And say if we help them with spay-neuter, that often increases the value of their pet to them, especially those unwanted behaviors. And then sometimes they rehome the pet on their own. And we have an example of where there was an adult daughter trying to help her mother, 14 cats, and just out of control needing help. And we were able to let her know about resources so that she could pay for 9 spay-neuter surgeries total, and she found homes for those 9 themselves through social media, through friends and family, and then only 5 of the 9 actually came to us, and then we had those cats come in over time. They didn't come in all on one day. So that's a case example. But the first comment there is from a citizen. Thank you so much for turning me down. I mean, who tells you that? But yeah, the heat of the moment, they were frustrated and they really love their pet. That's not going to happen all the time. We know that, but that's definitely what we hear some of the time. And then our customer service staff say that they're able to, they enable the public, they encourage the public, they give them the tools to put in the effort themselves, and that they feel like, as a shelter staff person, that we're placing the priority on the pet and not on the person's convenience. Like I said, this is case by case, totally different cases. Are considered every time. Is the home unsafe for the pet? Of course, we take it right then and there. Is it unsafe for the citizen? We take it right then and there. Overly sick, overly old, those are terms that the front staff uses. We don't do owner request euthanasias as on an appointment basis. That's one of our policies that we changed when the Sheriff's Office took over and Target Zero helped us work more efficiently. We tell people that we would we think that that is something that you is best done with your veterinarian that you have a relationship with. But if the pet is, the person's in dire need, of course we help them in that way because they have nowhere else to go. Evictions are immediate. We are the sheriff's office, so we do get animals or people that are coming in with evictions. You know, it depends on what the scene is in the lobby, case by case. Of course, we don't, just because you're angry and crazy in the lobby does not mean we're going to take your pet, but you know, it's all case by case. And then we do take animals that are coming from domestic violence situations because the Florida shelters do not accept pets. So overall, if we can just...
Excuse me, sorry, Sarah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take a quick moment to remind everybody to get your questions in early so they're processed in enough time to be answered at the end. All right, back to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Jessie. Yeah, so I wanted to sort of break things up anyway because I feel like this brings me to the concept of you know, we'll talk more about methods of managing our intake, but philosophically right now, I wanted to break up the webinar to say, you know, what are we doing as shelters, you know, as a movement over the years. So many things have changed, and it's awesome that we're changing as rapidly as we are and in such a progressive way. And but I do think we can help a lot of shelters still too. And one of those ways is to ask ourselves, why is it harder for our pets to go to a new home than it is to stay in the one that they're already in? You know, of course, you don't want to have a poor situation for that pet, but we can help those people out. And, you know, I think that this speaks to an overall concept of why are we opposed to something like the idea of replacing a cat that was removed from its familiar neighborhood, placing it into a rescue where it's not familiar with its surroundings. So that whole concept of we need to do best by the pet in the situation that they are and the situation that they prefer, first and foremost, rather than thinking that we may be their best option every single time. And I think overall, shelters are changing to become more of a place for those pets that need the most help and to become a community resource rather than just a housing location for pets that otherwise would find perfectly fine homes. So anyway, back to intake mitigation. We do keep track of our appointments, which ones come in, which ones don't. And I'll go through this really quick. It looks something like this. A couple of these kitties and puppies have reasons like no time for their living situation. The wife has medical issues. The orange are the appointments that don't come to us or canceled or have found other options outside of the shelter. The green are the appointments that do come to us, and this is a month. I blocked out addresses and whatnot, even though this is small writing, but you get the concept. Most people are able to find ways of handling their situation outside of the shelter. And then we get a lower number coming in. So, and we'll talk about some more numbers towards the end, but a word about surrender fees. That's something that other shelters do and that we have decided not to do, and it still works for us. But those owner surrender fees, I definitely wanted to mention those because those monetary resources, in theory, can take care of those pets that are surrendered. And I've put a few examples of shelters that I have familiarity with. So, and like I said, we do not have an owner surrender fee. So, drop-off boxes. We're moving in now to the other methods of managing intake, and Joe is going to say a word about drop-off boxes.
Yeah, when we took over, they had a whole section of boxes that were outside the shelter, located next to the dumpster, where people would just come and discard their animals. When we approached Sheriff Ivey about eliminating these drop boxes at Dr. Boyd's recommendation as well as target zeros. He was concerned about some pushback from the community. We explained to him that this was what we needed to do to be a more humane community. His other concern was that these people would just start dumping these animals and our strays would go up. So what we found when we eliminated the drop boxes, our strays have not gone up, just like Target Zero said they would not, and we have become more humane. I think the final straw was when we found a dog in the drop box that had been hit by a car and had been in there with broken bones all night long and not being cared for. So those are the kind of things that we don't want to happen. So we were able to get rid of the drop boxes, and we had very little pushback from the community on it. We would just communicate to them and educate them as to why we don't have them, and they were pretty understanding.
Yes, and another one of our methods of managing intake is our Finder to Foster program. Thanks to Maddie, we have been given a Maddie's Fund Innovation Grant for our Finder to Foster program, and this helps us to turn those finders to fosters, and that might be one less pet entering the shelter that day. If the finder is interested in listing that pet as found with us, and then they can take the pet home after medical treatment, to-go home kit, all of those things, making it easier for them to turn right back around with the pet that probably was with them for like the past couple days, looking around for the owner type thing. And then we can keep that pet out of the shelter for a little while. And so this is a case that we have of one of our Finder to Fosters, Eddie, a sweet little hound that a Cocoa Beach police officer was given this dog on the street late one night by a homeless person. And immediately when I saw it on the truck, it was had parvo written all over its face. And sure enough, it had parvo written all over the chest too. We were able to treat that dog at an emergency clinic, never entered the shelter with such an infectious disease, and she is fully recovered. So thanks to Maddie that we were able to keep one more pet out of the shelter, and then they decided to adopt that dog because of course, that's what happens when you keep a dog in your house for that long. So cute. And then so another method is, like I mentioned, if you can have finders, instead of bringing them straight to you, do a little bit of groundwork, and we have our enforcement officers doing this every day, but if the finders can do a little bit of groundwork and list their pet, or list this stray animal with online service. The local one that we have is called Brevard Lost Pets. There are other ones that are national, even just their Facebook account, let friends in the area know. Lots of neighborhoods have their own little Facebook groups, and so posting it in social media that way or online in some way that they found a pet will help keep that pet out of the shelter. And if you, I'm going to go back a slide, because if you don't have one of these in your area as a shelter, then definitely encourage you to create your own if it doesn't exist. So that's what our Brevard Lost Pets page looks like, and it's operated by a total separate entity, a citizen in Brevard County, and all these little pieces make a more humane community and help us out at the shelter.
One of the things that Dr. Boyd briefly mentioned was the enforcement officers working in the street. And although that's a completely different program, our Return to Field program, it's really important that you develop a relationship with your enforcement officers if it's a separate entity from your shelter. We're fortunate that enforcement and shelter operations fall under the same boss. That's us. So we were able to put in a very robust return to owner program. Our enforcement officers are told that the last thing on your mind should be bringing any animal to the shelter. We want you to find that owner. So they spend a lot of time in the field doing that, to the extent that they have to actually call their supervisor go through a little checklist with their supervisor to make sure they've done their due diligence before they bring it to the shelter, and then they'll call the shelter to tell them they're on their way. So, that really is a very key component to this program, because we keep a lot of animals out of the shelter that sometimes if you don't have a good relationship with those enforcement officers, they'll just bring animals in because it's easier, and that's not what we want to happen. So if you don't have a relationship with your enforcement people, I would encourage you to try to develop one.
And another method for managing intake is making it easy for people to take home kittens. We have a Kittens to Go program where we supply all sorts of good things, milk replacer, warm rice socks, or those pink warmy discs, fleece blanket, the perfect nipples that go on the bottle, you name it, and scales to weigh your kitten daily, multiple times a day. So furnishing all of that and making it easy for finders to take kittens home or fosters to take kittens home is a way to manage those kittens coming in. Another thing Joe can talk about is our obedience class.
When we instituted the program, our mitigation counselor was telling us that a lot of people were trying to surrender animals because of behavior issues, and sometimes minor ones. So we thought was if we could create an obedience class and offer it once a week, we could offer this to not only people that adopt animals from us to help solve any issues that they may have so that they keep their pets that they adopt, but also anyone that's on the surrender list is able to come in on those Saturday mornings with our trained people that are behavior specialists and try to correct those behaviors. And what we found was some of these things like dogs are on the couch, or they're not housebroken, or they're chewing up my shoes. They were very simple things, and they were very happy to be able to correct those issues and keep their animal because they were at a point where they were frustrated and didn't know where to turn to and didn't have money to hire trainers. So this option helped us keep these animals in the home as well.
Another extra little piece of our policies that I wanted to add into this webinar as a method for managing intake is intake from veterinary clinics. Not every community is the same, but some communities may experience this where a veterinary clinic will take in a patient that they feel they need to take over ownership of, and then turn around and bring that animal or ask the enforcement officers to come pick that animal up. And so we treat local veterinarians in the same way we treat any private citizens or entities. We don't want to be the middleman. We want to have a conversation with that owner. We want to be the primary person that they're talking to about how they're going to handle this. So we will take an owner surrender case from a veterinary clinic one time, our enforcement officers visit and discuss that we're not going to do it again, and that we don't want to be the middleman, or that we don't want a middleman in the arrangement. We don't want to be left out of the arrangement, and then we don't accept owner surrenders from them again. So that's a policy that we have that's important. And all of this is so that we can handle the intake that we cannot manage. And I laugh because otherwise I'd be crying. Open admission for strays, whether they're from citizens or enforcement officers. We're open admission for neglect and hoarding cases, cruelty cases. We have an estimated stray holding capacity based on calculations, but basically you might not know how many are coming in one day. One day it could be low, one day it could be high, and the average is, what comes out in the calculations. But you have to be prepared for the ones that come in without an owner. So, and that's, those are plentiful. And these are some of the cases, dogs that can't walk, neglected chihuahuas, severe mange, bot flies in your face if you're a bunny rabbit. So that is because of all of those ones that we can't control. That is why we do want to manage the ones that we can control. And that is working within your capacity for care. And we didn't invent this, of course. There are amazing experts in the field who have developed principles and guidelines. Million Cat Challenge has information. Dr. Levy has and Dr. Scarlett have a wonderful webinar, Maddie's Fund, about working within your humane capacity for care. Dr. Sandra Newberry has a webinar through the ASPCA on calculating your humane capacity. But we're not magic. We have to work within our capacity. And as I mentioned before, there's many other strategies that we use to work within our capacity as listed here, but I like to call the first box, the one that we're talking about, manage intake and intake mitigation, the we are not magic box. And basically, it's the plan your live outcome from minute one box. It's not working within your capacity is not saying, well, take them all, throwing up your hands and saying, now what do we do? Or thinking about these pets, on the day of their stray hold is off, We need to start thinking about them having a live outcome on the very first day. And that's what we do at our shelter. And we have meetings about it. We do daily rounds, but we want to make sure that we maximize that chance of a live outcome. So I can't stress enough to everyone to calculate your capacity for care, and wanted to share with you that we base our capacity on live outcomes. So of course, we have the housing capacity, which I mentioned that before, like a certain number of dog cages, a certain number of cat cages. That's your housing capacity. It's a finite number of cages. And of course, that finite number of cages can turn into the dreaded crates on the floor, and that's what we want to avoid. But we want to get even better than that and base your capacity on how many you can get out alive, and that may even mean that you have empty kennels. But for us here, I even included, when I calculated our capacity, I even included the return to fields, the return to owners, our rescues that get out, because that's how much we can do and how much we can get out. And that's how many we need in the building, and not anymore. Because if we have more, that turns into a vicious cycle, and that means higher likelihood of euthanasia. So, of course, there's also staffing capacity, and we're all totally in touch with that emotion right there, because shelters always, might be trouble getting good staff. Staff can be transient sometimes. Training is important for keeping staff, and of course, the guidelines for standards of care describes what NACA describes is that there's a certain amount of time that we need to allot for caring for every animal. And that seems rudimentary, but it's something that we can consider and something that gets out of control really fast if we're taking animals in that we can't take care of. So what happens when, Joe wants to, okay. So what happens when you have a capacity breach? What happens if you are working outside of your capacity, or like we were cool for a while, and then all of a sudden it started to feel really tense and out of control, and that happened earlier this summer. So we said, well, we need to make a change, and this summer we decided that we needed to temporarily suspend our owner surrender program. And we realized that this is temporary, but we needed to still work within our life-saving capacity.
I think one of the more important things when we made that decision was we communicated it well within our own chain of command up and through the sheriff. We explained the position we were in. We explained that we were operating over our capacity, and it was not good for the animals. It was also not good for the employees. So we told the sheriff this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to communicate to people when they come in or they call. We did get some pushback originally from some of the people who call. So what do you mean you won't take my dog? What do you mean you won't take an appointment? You've been doing that for years. And we would explain to them, the girls on the phone would explain to them, well, here's the reason why. We can only take care of so many animals. We only have so many employees. And right now we have been flooded with strays at the beginning of the summer, and we just can't care for this many animals. The animals are better off in your care than in our care right now because we are over our capacity. And the community was supportive. Once they knew the reason why, and we communicated that reason why, in most cases people understood. So the key there, I think, was, number one, communicating it internally so that everybody was on the same page in our organization, including up to the sheriff, and then communicating a singular message to the community when they called about surrendering their animals.
So what does full capacity look like? Does it look like crates on the floor, multiple animals in one cage, no portals for the cats? It doesn't have to look like that. This is what our full capacity looks like. It's not, like I said, we're no frills. There's no cute murals on the wall, that type of thing. But we work within our capacity, and sometimes that means that there are empty kennels. So let's get into some numbers. Because numbers speak, right? So these are just the rough numbers, and I'll get to some charts in the next slide. But basically what the highlight here is that we have just terrible data, rough data, prior to October 2014. So the intake was probably roughly, but and I know it's a huge gap, but between 8,000 and 12,000. We estimate 12,000 prior and then 8,000 for 2014, roughly. So I think it's 8,800 approximately for 2014. And so what does that mean? This is a monthly intake, and the years for 2016 2014, 2015 are in dark green. The months that are in 2016, 2017, 2018 are in lighter green. And overall, we have experienced a decrease in intake. However, we do have some of those cute little spiky things in there for the 2018 because we are a live, real, breathing shelter. This particular spike in intake for May 2018 was 3 times as many kittens entered the shelter May 2018 as did May 2017 and 2016. So we're going to have those events, we need to adapt for those events, but we are, like I said, we're a real live and breathing shelter. And even Dr. Levy posted on a listserv, hey, why do you guys think you're seeing so many kittens? It's so early. And I believe it is from the rain that we experienced in Florida. And this is just for us. We just had a consistent rainstorms for like 3 to 4 weeks. And cute kittens outdoors look like they need to be rescued, but wet kittens look even more like they need to be rescued. So we definitely saw an increase in our intake there. We have been keeping numbers for our Intake Mitigation Owner Surrender Program, of course, up until May of this year. And we started this program in December 2015. And as you can see, we have the dogs on the top and the cats on the bottom. And we chart the raw data of how many appointments we make, how many actually come in, and how many don't come in. And then we have a percentage. So, we do that through the whole, they calculated it up until we were taking appointments, and you can see that the numbers speak for themselves. We experienced great success with managing our intake through the Intake Mitigation Program, as 70 to 80% decrease in the own animals that were admitted just by talking to people and providing all those resources and having that program. Of course, addressing the fears. I hate the word dumps. I really think that word doesn't describe well how much people need help. Of course, there's jerks out there, but most people are really wanting the best for their animals. And so we definitely had to address some fears. And we saw, like Joe said, we did not see an increase in dumps at the front desk or ties outside or drops into the fence, and no abnormal increase of strays in the field. Do you want to say anything about that? Okay. Let's dive into some more data. So this graph we really wanted to put in here to show that with our intake mitigation program and the other methods that we mentioned of managing our intake, for dogs, we still see a decrease in intake over the years. You'll see that the enforcement officer stray is in dark green and the citizen stray is in light green. And, we're experiencing some bumps, but overall decreasing. And if we can compare light green chunks for 2016, 2017, 2018, and that 2018 is year to date, we'll see that that chunk isn't really huge for when we started intake mitigation. I don't think it shows that we don't have an increase in strays in our dogs after starting an intake mitigation program. In fact, it's decreased. So we're not seeing people go around the other means, dumping the animals down the street or getting an enforcement officer to take it for them anyway. We're just not seeing that with cats. And we also don't believe we're seeing that with dogs. We also don't believe we're seeing that with cats as well, although you can see that we get a little uptick, here because, like I said, we're a real shelter with real problems and real stuff going on. But most importantly, we see that 2014, 2015, our intake is declining, and definitely our enforcement officer intake has declined. And then even though we are seeing an increase in citizen stray intake of cats, I would like to argue that those cats need us. They're not the cats that otherwise have a fat and sassy sitting on the couch and the person's just sick of them. They're actually the cats that need us the most, and that's what I feel in my day-to-day work is that we have these problem kitties galore. The kitty up in the left has scabies as well as had to lose his herpes eye. The middle kitty has a carpus that's infected and the bone is lytic, and we're working on that. Right now, actually. The kitty down at the bottom to the left has a broken pelvis. The kitty at the bottom to the right has diabetes, and a mom with a sweet kitten that needs to get out to foster. So these are the cats that we're seeing, and that's kind of the problem we do want to have. We want cats and dogs that need us the most to be coming into the shelter, and we want those cats and dogs that can find a home otherwise outside of the shelter to use the community resources to stay out of the shelter in that way. Before I recap, Joe, do you?
Well, as Dr. Boyd starts to wrap it up, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One is that success starts at the top in animal welfare, at least for us, is what we've seen. And so whoever sits in that seat at the top, in our case, we're fortunate as Sheriff Ivy, but that person has got to be supportive, and they have to have your back. One of the things that Sheriff says is he stands behind us when we need to kick in the butt. He stands beside us when we need help in the trenches, and he stands in front of us when we're taking shots. I know that's easy to say, but whether your operation is under a county manager or a city manager or a sheriff or whoever it may be, communication is the key. Communication internally and externally. You need to communicate with your staff internally as well as up through your chain of command, and it's important to communicate with the community, because without the community you can't get to where you need to be. I would also add that we're here to help. Our information is listed here. If there's anything that the Brevard County Sheriff's Office can do for any of you, we're happy to provide whatever assistance we can. We're still learning. We took over this in 2014, and as I said earlier, the learning curve was pretty steep. But fortunately, we had Dr. Boyd that kept us on the straight and narrow. and I think we've done well, but we can do better, and we continue to work every single day to do better. Watch your data. Your data is going to tell you all kinds of things, and we record everything. We send out daily reports every day. When our intake got so high in May, we instituted a daily list that went out to all of the supervisors and all of the important people in animal services so they could see how the numbers were rising and declining, so that we knew when we were back at our capacity for care. So communicate, make sure that your bosses support you, and keep track of those numbers. So good luck in all that you do, and I'll let Dr. Boyd finish up.
I think that definitely sums it up. And mostly we want to thank Maddie's Fund for having us share all of this with you via this webinar. Open admission is, let me go back to our points. Open admission and managed intake is possible. We can manage the intake of owner surrenders and help the pets in our community. Shelters are evolving to taking in the animals most in need and getting them out fast. No one is magic. Work within your capacity for care, and managing intake works. It sure does work, and it helps pets. So thank you, Maddie's Fund. Thank you to our host, and we'll definitely take any questions. But if everybody's happy, that's cool too.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Joe, for a wonderful presentation. I did want to let the audience know that any links you saw on the slides during the presentation, those links are also in the green widget button at the bottom of your screen, so please check those out. We do have quite a few questions for you guys, and we will probably go over maybe a few minutes. We hope everybody can stay with us so that we can get to as many questions as possible. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and push the first question to the slide area. And here is your question. We are a no-kill shelter with limitations on the communities we service. People dump animals in our area from other areas to make sure they go to a no-kill shelter. Any suggestions?
Well, one of the things that we did was we posted some of those signs. You saw a picture of it that informed people it is a crime to abandon your animal. You know, it's common sense as it is, but not everybody realizes it is. And then we also put up cameras so that they not only see the sign, but they also see a camera staring at them. Because when they pull in, they don't think about that. They don't think about cameras. They don't think about violating the law. They're just trying to relieve their frustration and get their animal in somebody else's hands. Then they come in, they see the sign, they see the cameras, go, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. That has stopped some of that, but that's one suggestion that we can give you. I don't know what else to say about that. It's a difficult situation when people are bringing animals in, and we're fortunate that we've not had much of that. We do have an occasional animal that somebody throws over the fence or ties up outside, and then we do our very best to track that person down, and we've been very successful at that. And when we contact them, we tell them, hey, we have your pet. We would like for you to come pick them up. And if you don't come and pick them up, we'll send one of our enforcement officers out to pay you a visit. And we've been successful at that. Of course, we do have some that we don't ever find, but so just do your due diligence, put up signs, try to put up cameras, and then when you do have one, do your absolute best to try to track down that owner, because word will get out in your community that you're going to hold people accountable.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. We have our next question ready for you. How do you think a finder to foster program could work in a shelter that has a contract with their city to hold the animal as a stray for a certain amount of days?
I would say that, like Joe mentioned earlier in the webinar, having a really awesome relationship, and that takes a lot of work with your municipalities that you have contracts with, but building up that relationship such that you can have a meeting with them and say, hey, this is our need, and this is what we need to manage our end of the deal and to do best by the animals in our care. And this is an idea that we have. Can you be flexible in saying that, can we list it as a found animal, so when the owner comes in, hopefully, then you have a registry for them to say, hey, you have our animal, and it's been in a foster situation, hasn't been in the shelter, and then that foster gives the animal back to the owner.
Yeah, and another example of those kind of partnerships, we have some limited intake shelters in our community that we work well with. When we started the Owner Surrender Mitigation Program, we found that some people were simply just going to these other places and telling them that they found a stray and here's the stray. When we saw that was happening, we went to those facilities, and then we started providing them with our appointment list, with names and descriptions of the animals, and acting as good partners when somebody comes in and say, I have this animal to stray, and they go, well, I don't think so because you're on the list for an appointment in 2 weeks at the animal shelter. So those relationships are vital, and I think the relationship with the Finder to Foster program would work as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah and Joe. Here is your next question. How do you change the concept for the community? Meaning, how do you get the customers to embrace that there are other resources than pet surrender to a shelter? A lot of times our customers wait until they feel like they've tried everything and have set their minds to surrender only.
Well, in most cases, they have not tried everything, and they're simply uneducated. And our goal is to educate them and say, no, we realize you're frustrated, but there are other resources available to you. Of course, we have those exceptions for public safety and other things, but as time goes on, you will build more trust in your community, and this will become easier. So my suggestion is, again, that communication with your community and also inside your organization, so that you're sending a singular uniform message to the public. You don't want your staff to be telling them one thing one day and one thing another day. This is a difficult one. It's taken us time, and I won't say that we have the confidence of everybody in our community, because I know we don't. But it just takes time, and you just have to stay at it, and you have to believe that you're doing the right thing. Your mission is to save as many animals as possible, and you're going to do that. And we have adopted the concept that we don't have a plan B, we only have a plan A, and that's to maintain our live kill status, because our goal is to save every animal as possible.
I wanted to share some of the language that we use too when you're at the front desk and a challenging situation comes up, and the people are just feel like they have their mind set, is that what we promote and we try to share with them is that we want that pet to have the best outcome possible, but that we do have other pets that are coming in from neglect cases or hoarding cases or enforcement officers or car accidents and the dog's thrown out the window, that type of thing. We're getting those pets every day, and we don't know the number that we're getting in theirs. So we need to make room for those animals as well as your animal. So that's the language that we like to use at the front desk, so that people understand it's, we're taking care of everybody, and that if you can help us out as a community member and just take a deep breath, and we'll help you, but we might not just help you today, but we're going to give you a follow-up call, and we'll help you down the road too. And that's when things sort of come into focus and calm down.
All right, thank you very much. I also just wanted to mention again that we do have a lot of great questions coming up, so we will be going over a few extra minutes and hope you will stay with us. Here is your next question. It's kind of a follow-up to that question. How do you get all your front office employees on the same page with case by case versus everything being black and white?
Yes. So like I said, we have a set of guidelines. We sat down with all of the shelter admin, and we said, how are we going to view aggressive dogs? How are we going to view aggressive cats? How are we going to view semi-social cats? How are we going to treat geriatric cats? How are we going to treat geriatric dogs? Or how are we going to treat evictions? All of the cases that we get, and we made those decisions ahead of time. And I definitely encourage every shelter to do that, to consensively sit down and say, what are we going to do? How are we all going to agree? And or what are we all going to agree on? What fits best for our shelter? Because what we experience here in Brevard County, Florida, is very different from maybe even the west coast of Florida and the west coast of the country right now, who's going through so much currently, or the northeast, or every shelter is different in that respect. So it's going to be different for you. But if you sit down and make these decisions ahead of time on what you might do, then everybody can have a playbook in front of them, and then you really have great supervisors, because we don't tolerate staff people that will say something that's not off script. I don't want to use off script, but just not part of our mission and not part of what we would say or promote. So we just have to get everybody on the same page, working as a team, and agree upon things ahead of time. Did you have an answer to that? Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. That was great information. I have your next question for you. My city is dealing with the situation of a big portion of residential humane advocates wanting no-kill, but our shelter is tied to a partner who makes a lot of money, and we can't get any counsel to listen about bringing no-kill here. We are frustrated and feel our hands are tied. I realize many residents in other cities do, but we do want an ordinance, as you spoke about.
I wonder what that entity is that makes a lot of money. Is it a veterinary entity? Like a volunteer veterinarian or something? Maybe Joe can speak to...
They did not specify.
Yeah, maybe Joe can speak to becoming no-kill in general.
Yeah, it really is a process, and it's not going to happen overnight. And one of the things that we had to do was meet with county commissioners when we were going through the ordinance process, and make sure that we had their buy-in. And of course, that comes with some compromises here and there. I mean, there's some things in our ordinance that I wish were in there that aren't yet, but I hope they are someday. So when you have a city council or a county commission that's not helping you, that's a problem. It goes back to whoever's at the top of that organizational chart, and if you have a city council or a county commission that's not helping, that's going to be very difficult. So I'm not sure how you would proceed there. But what we did was we went to each county commissioner and we educated them. Fortunately, they asked us to take over, and we did a good job, and we got to where we needed to be. So when we went back to the county commission, said, hey, we've done as much as we can do, but we need help. We need help with a better ordinance and more support from you. And we went to each one and met with them and explained what it is we wanted to do and tried to get their support. So that's about as best answers I can give you on that one.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Here are your next questions. Do you think having to make an appointment to surrender a pet discourages surrendering and promotes dumping of the pet?
Definitely not. Like when we spoke to it in the webinar, we have a conversation with them. We want adoptions to be conversational when they go out, but we also want intake to be conversational. So we have a conversation with them, and that's our first interaction is them with the owner over the phone, or when they come with their pet, because they felt like they've already made up their mind. But then we have this conversation with them and explain how, that there are other pets that need our help today, that we will help them with an appointment. And then we follow up with that call. We listen to them. Being good listeners is really important. And then we figure out what way to help them best. And mostly people are super happy about getting the help and finding an alternative for that pet. And like I said, the numbers speak for themselves. We don't see an increase of dogs being dumped. We don't see an increase in cats being dumped. Like I was saying, we do see an increase of cats for us for this year, but certainly feel like there were other reasons for that. We've been no kill and the word's out, man. So I feel like myself and our other veterinarian, Dr. Jenkins, are the veterinarians to all the sick and miserable cats in our community. So they're coming to us, which is good because they need us. They don't have owners. They need help to get that second chance and get back out, adoption or return to field. But we don't feel like they're being dumped, and the numbers don't show that. So that's good.
All right. Thank you very much. We have our next question. We have a municipal shelter that has decided to go managed intake. Many animals are being turned away, which means they are still out there. Is this legal for a municipal shelter?
Yeah, based on, these are awesome questions, by the way. We love getting all these. So thank you for everybody that turned in a question. It's just really based on their ordinance. And I love Municode. So what is municode.org or municode.com? Because I'm one of those veterinarians that reads package inserts, and I read the full study. I don't just read the synopsis. I love reading about all the details because those details will creep up on you. And when you need to know the answer, you might not know the answer unless you did your homework. So do your homework. Find your municipalities, a city, town, or county ordinances via Municode online, and you can read. There's usually an animal section, and you can read to see if your area must take owner surrenders. It certainly means that animals are still out there, but it's not just a shelter that is in charge of all of the pets in the community. It's a community that is in charge of the pets in the community, and it takes a team effort, and that's why we always want to emphasize that we are working towards becoming a humane community, and our shelter is just one part of that. And as I listed in the webinar, we have other limited intake shelters and other rescues that we work hand in hand with to become a humane community. So I would do your homework, and then it might be illegal, it might not be illegal, and then you can go from there. But I can tell you, even if it's not, even in communities that are not legally bound to take owner surrenders, managed intake works, and that's what we just can't emphasize that enough. Thanks.
All right, we are down to our last question. This question is similar to this previous question, another legality question, and maybe you have an additional insight for these people. So the question is, our shelter won't let the community take pictures or videos and keeps signs up. The partner shelter has been sending over their volunteers to stop any videoing on the city's premises. Is that legal? Sorry for my previous confusing questions.
We're thinking about it.
We have volunteers. We do have volunteers that come in and take pictures, and they'll take videos of the animals, and they'll post them on their personal Facebook pages. And there's some other animal welfare pages out there in Brevard County that they post them on. And to be honest with you, we encourage that. Anything that helps get our animals out of that shelter into a forever home is something that we want to look at. So we view our volunteers as very valuable partners. And if they'll spend extra time taking photographs and videos and putting them online, we think that's great. Our volunteers work and walk with the dogs every day, and it's just a good thing. So I'm not sure why anybody would not want that to happen if it helps you get those animals out alive. So is it legal? I really couldn't speak to that. But I can tell you that if somebody walks into our shelter, it's a public building. If they wanted to walk down through our adoption floor and take photographs or video, we wouldn't stop them. They're not doing anything illegal in our community, so we would allow it. In fact, it happens on a regular basis. So I can't speak for that community, but in our community, it is legal, and we allow them to do it.
And I would just add, it sounds like it depends on if your shelter is a municipal shelter or if it's a private organization. You know, private organizations can make their own policies, of course. We make our own policies as well as a municipal organization, but of course we have some policies that sort of are an overarching policy for the sheriff's office or an overarching policy as a public facility or an overarching policy as a governmental facility. So we are the government, so you know, so we have different policies that way that designed to make us more transparent. So I hope that answers your question. These have all been awesome questions.
That was a great answer. Thank you, guys. And with that, that will be the end of our presentation this evening. Thank you to Sarah and Joe and all of you for sharing your evening with us. Your opinion is important to us, so please take a moment to fill out the evaluation survey by clicking on the link on your screen. Be sure to register for and attend the next presentation in our life-saving series, How to Go from 50 to 90% Live Release Rate Really Fast, with Dr. Kim Sanders from Anderson County PAWS in Anderson County, South Carolina. Mark your calendars for Thursday, December 6th at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. Find more free educational opportunities on our website at maddiesfund.org and on Maddie's University at maddiesuniversity.org. Again, thank you for your participation in our webcast tonight. Have a great evening.